Okay, I know our finance staff and everybody's getting the final preparations of the budget, but we'll go ahead and call this meeting to order of this the special city council meeting times 5:02. Opens Meeting Act is posted on the rear wall next to the agendas. This time we'll have a roll call.
Please cast your vote for roll call. Seven council members are present, Mayor.
Right. Okay, our item tonight on the agenda is the presentation of the 2023 to 2025 biannual budget. And so I do have some opening comments. I'd just like to, again, welcome everybody here tonight. Welcome our department heads who have put in a lot of work and effort into this budget, as well as the finance staff. Thank you for members of the public for being here and for the city council. Since becoming mayor, careful budget management has been one of my top priorities. Myself, along with the city staff, have spent countless hours in meetings to craft a budget that addresses our growing needs as a community and continues to maximize every one of your tax dollars. City's budget is very complex with many moving parts. In our presentation tonight, try to simplify many of these things and lay out my main priorities as mayor. I want to recognize City Administrator Jody Sanders, Utility General Manager Jeff Shanahan, our department heads for their hard work, their collaboration, and their effort to put this budget together. There's no doubt we rely on your expertise, experience, and knowledge to help us understand what our needs are as a city. Year over year, our department heads continue to do a tremendous job staying within their budgets and managing the spending and continuing to maintain a high level of service and keeping our equipment needs up to date and all the rest that our community needs have. So I want to thank them for that. A city budget is a team effort amongst our elected officials up here, department heads, finance, city administration, to come up with the best way we can move our city forward in a positive direction. And without question, we all take very seriously the importance of spending your tax and ratepayer dollars. Before I dive into more details, we have our presentation tonight from our city administrator. I just like to lay out a couple of things. Most of our time tonight will be spent on the city budget. This involves, as we know, the services that most of the public is familiar with, including public safety, fire, police, streets, building department, administration, planning department, library, parks and rec, public works. This side of the budget's mainly funded through property tax, sales tax, including the local option sales tax, occupation taxes, special funds like the Keno Fund and the Special Projects Fund, which includes any federal or state grant dollars. So state and federal regulations do determine what these specific funds can be spent on. And we go through an annual audit every year. And this year we again received an unqualified audit opinion due to the great job of our staff and their work that they put in. So as we make decisions as elected officials, we must trust our staff to make sure our budget falls within applicable laws governing our funds. The other side of this budget is the Fremont Department of Utilities. This includes our water, wastewater, electric, and gas systems. The utility budget is a silo within the city budget and operates like a business without the influence of tax dollars. Just like any business, the focus of our utility is to set rates and generate revenues that cover expenses, help pay for capital improvements, and cover long-term debt. Fremont's utility department continues to be one of the best run utilities in the state. We continue to pride ourselves on delivering cost-effective and efficient power, water, and gas to our over 15,000 customers. And I believe this budget tonight reflects that. When our utility is operating successfully, it is able to transfer part of the annual margins to the city by providing a transfer to city operations. In essence, if the utility department does well, it helps out the city. And so running these business enterprises well is extremely important to the continued health and growth of the city of Fremont. So to summarize, our biannual budget tonight we will be presenting will include both the city and Fremont Department of Utilities. Funding for the city budget includes receipts from taxes, property sales, occupation and gas, state and federal grants, state municipal aid, and other sources that are subject to state and federal laws that govern how the money is spent. These act as silos within the budget. Good budgeting practices involve maintaining reserves in these specific budgets for large one-time capital improvements, which we will go over those tonight. And the utility department acts as an independent business enterprise, including water, wastewater, electric, and natural gas within the city budget. And as long as it operates successfully, provides a transfer of funds to benefit the city and offset city expenses. So I just wanted to go over some of those things and lay out. Again, I want to thank our finance department and their work. And at this point, I will turn it over to our city administrator, Jody Sanders, who will begin the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, members of council. Jody Sanders, City Administrator / Treasurer. Before we get started, I would really want to echo the mayor's comments about the teamwork. The folks that are like from the third row back, those folks are the ones that put this budget together. And they've done a great job. Each one of them is an expert in their field, and we're very lucky to have them on our staff. I also would like to point out, we've got Kristen Klingsick here, who's been willing to step in as our interim finance director. And she's just done a yeoman's effort stepping up this year. We have Laura Anderson is our accountant, and she's relatively new, but has kind of been dumped in by fire and is doing a great job for us as well. And so we're all here with a fair number of documents to go through. We have a PowerPoint. Many of the things that you'll see on the PowerPoint are included in these records. At this time, I think it probably would be appropriate for us to receive these into the record so that council can have right in front of them the pages that we'll be referring to tonight.
Councilman Jensen.
Motion to receive.
Councilman Sukram.
I'll second.
Cast your votes to receive.
Motion carries 7-0, Mayor.
So does she know? Yeah, yeah. Sure. Okay. Okay, so this is, I want to reiterate that this is a first draft of the proposed budget. On some of the documents you'll see in front of you, you'll see a timestamp of something after 4:30. Some, maybe one even said 5:02. I'm not sure. We've really been working hard at trying to make sure all of the pieces and parts match together. A change in one funding source can create havoc and have us moving from a multitude of accounts and worksheets that we have to rework through there. So the mayor and administration conducted listening sessions with the city council members. And during that time, the themes that they talked about really impacted or were referencing our the identified value statements that we had. We've got fiscal responsibility. So council as a group, you were all very clear that you did not want to increase our property tax request to exceed the limit that would require the special hearing, or as folks in the community have started calling it, the postcard meeting. And so, you know, the budget that you see in front of you tonight reflects that as well. So city facilities are a priority. And in terms of retention and recruitment, if you think about, hello, please come and be a firefighter with the city of Fremont, and you get to spend the night in a dorm that was built in 1964. That's, or 65, excuse me. That's the kind of thing that we're really trying to address in this next 2-year budget. The same goes for streets, parks, and fleet maintenance as well, giving them areas where they can kind of spread out and really do the work that we're asking them to do, and to get really good qualified personnel. We don't want to take the folks that are willing to take any job. We want the cream of the crop. And then personnel. wanting to make sure that, there's inflation pressures on our, everybody is facing inflation pressures. And so in the course of the listening sessions, we visited with council about plans, how we might consider addressing those concerns for our employees. I really won't talk a lot more about that because we are still in negotiations with the FOP. And so, but just know that the numbers that you see reflected are based on those estimates from the conversations that we had during those listening sessions. And then another value that you identified as key was public safety. Is one of our values, and certainly getting that new police facility in place in the next 2-year budget, as well as the 2 new fire stations. We're kind of still in the development stage with that, identifying some potential properties. But you'll see costs that will be incurred in the next 2-year budget for the new fire station, as well as and I mentioned the wage negotiations going on with the FOP, and we have been visiting a little bit with the fire union as well, talking about recruitment and retention. Some of the other values that you talked about was quality of life, and we think that in this budget, we really have addressed some of those. Primarily the library expansion project, to have the facility that will be able to offer the public. It will become hopefully a jewel in our community. And amenities, and that's a nice word for restrooms and shelters instead of porta potties in the city parks. And in the capital improvement plan, you'll see a proposed amphitheater for John C. Fremont Park. Jennifer Dam in the planning department will be working on an affordable housing plan that's required by state statute. You approve the contract for that to get started, but certainly affordable housing is something that is a concern for all of us in the community. And so we're hoping to address the quality of life for folks with that, as well as the transit program. It's a new fund, or a kind of a resuscitation of an old fund that's Transit Fund 25. And you'll see that in the details. You did not get all of the details behind the numbers. We will be emailing those to City Council, but also posting them on the city website so that members of the public that are interested and council will have all of the backup, the details behind the numbers of what you're looking at. And then one of the other items that we've talked about is teamwork, and certainly getting a fleet maintenance streets and parks building that allows for some collaboration and, not duplication of services. We're hoping to get some economies of scale. We're excited. We have a new fleet manager on board, and, he's already making some suggestions and, really helping us change how we're looking at our vehicles and equipment in general. One of the other things that this budget has done in terms of teamwork is we're trying as hard as we can to leverage private funding for the library is a great example of that, as well as grant funding. And then also, the use of public funds, working with others. There's a group that is working with Angie and Nick on the transit system, a bit of a task force, but there are a number of nonprofits in town that are looking at trying to help us get that off the ground and make it affordable for our citizens. And then the Certified Creative District was certainly a great example of kind of a collaboration and bringing both the public sector as well as the nonprofits together to better our community. So as I mentioned, we've been really scrambling to get numbers put together. You have a chart in your packet that explains or that has the numbers in it, but I felt like sometimes numbers bore the pants off of some folks. So to the extent that we could, I put these together rather quickly this afternoon. And that's something else too. I want to be clear as we're going through this budget. It's a working document. This is the first draft. I should say when changes are made to it, we will be keeping track of the changes as they're made from this point on. So if we realize, oh, we didn't show a funding source for this, or, oh my goodness, we need an expense for that, we'll just keep track of those and give you kind of this is how it's changed from the last time that you've seen it. This is the source of general fund revenues, and this is how we budgeted in 2023. The most significant difference that you see there is, or the significant amount that you see that's unusual, is other income. And I believe we were budgeting for some grants to come in. I believe the SAFER grant, which we did not get, was a large chunk of that, the source of other funds. But you can see our property taxes were budgeted to support us by 23%, sales tax by 16%. When we get to where we think our year-end estimate is going to be, property taxes account for about 25%. Sales tax is 17%. Charges for services, that's where we're working on our master fee schedule, working at getting that to be a kind of a more fair share of cost payer. And then in the contribution section, well, no, that wouldn't be in the general fund, excuse me. You can see occupation, lodging taxes. Those are staying pretty level at about 8% of what supports the general fund. And then I would be remiss not to point out the transfer from utilities. And the mayor made mention of that in his opening remarks, how what we receive from the utilities is 6.25% of the revenue that's generated. It does not include electricity that's sold on the grid. And it does not include for the natural gas portion, we take the total revenue less the cost of the gas, because gas prices, as everybody knows, goes up and down. And so to kind of stabilize that, we only take the percentage on the profit that we have on that. Well, it's not really profit, it's covering overhead, really. The next slide is what we're budgeting for 2024. We're looking at property tax being only 24% of our budget because we ended up with a very modest increase in our allowable growth. This year it's 3.26. And so the amount that we'll be able to, the tax that we'll be able to levy, well, excuse me, the growth was 1.26. Adding the 2% gets us to 3.26, which, and I apologize, I don't have a slide for this. You do have the valuation that came from the county. And the last column on the right shows the real growth percentage. But what that impact is, because as everyone knows, there was significant increase in valuations that had nothing to do with growth. Growth would be annexations and new builds in the community. And so that's the only piece that we're proposing, kind of taking, if you will. And in doing so, that will result in, it's a very, very slight decrease in our levy, but it will result in a small decrease in our levy. The amount coming over from the utilities represents 19%. Property tax relief from sales tax is 15%. And again, the occupation lodging tax is occupation tax. That, by the way, that does include the food and beverage tax. only accounts for about 8% of the revenue that we get. And then this is how we're budgeting for 2025 for expected revenues. Property taxes take a larger chunk of 27%. We're not anticipating a significant increase in the property tax request. It's simply that there'll be less funding, other funds, contributions, those kinds of things coming in to support the projects that we have in 2025. And again, we could get additional grants or something like that that we're not aware of. We would certainly hope that we would get additional grants, but we don't budget for them unless we've already been awarded them. Or if we try really hard to say, for example, we started to do that with the SAFER grant 2 years ago, where, okay, if we're hiring 6 new firefighters that we're anticipating paying for it with the grant, we made the amount of the grant equal the amount of the additional expense. So it's basically property tax neutral. We're not taxing folks for something that we're expecting to get a grant on. This is the chart that I was talking about. I believe that that's in the packet that you have in front of you, so you can see a little bit more closely what those numbers look like. Some people like those. This was a bit of a self-deprecating remark here. Couldn't get all the funds done. Was not able to get the sales tax recap where we can look at it in a little bit more concise. You don't have that. I apologize. Only so many hours in the day. This is our street fund, and it's showing the street fund revenues. Some of the areas that you'll see is our gas tax continues to grow, which is a good thing, obviously. And let's see, gas tax. It's the green number right along in here. The amount that we budget for 2024 is known and told to us by the Department of Transportation. And so 2025 is my best guess, being very conservative. The thing that you'll note is where we are at with our the revenues. We've got a fair amount of money coming in from other funds, predominantly sales tax, but also a small amount, well, not that small, but an amount coming in for from the general fund, where the Parks Department's share of the new building for the street parks and fleet maintenance. This is showing the breakdown on the street fund, very condensed and compressed. The amounts that you see here for fixed assets for 23, 24, and 25. First of all, let's stop and just take a breath here. $14 million in improved street improvements in 2024 is the amount that we have budgeted. For 2023, if we had a project that we weren't sure as we were budgeting if it was going to be done by the end of the fiscal year, we budgeted for it the remainder to be paid in 2024. So this year in estimate may not include some things. For example, I think on your capital improvement list, you'll see that Lincoln Avenue, the project cost, there's a part that's in 2024. So it's buried in this number, but ultimately we will pay it out in 2023. I believe that they'll have that pretty well wrapped up. This is the street fund. So you'll see that we have principal and interest payments on those highway allocation pledge bonds. And so we have accounted for those here. Showing how we're using fund balance in this fund. We had we're projecting that by the end of 2023, we'll have, right now, we're projecting $14 million in street fund balance. That's a lot of reserves, pent up demand. And Justin is certainly doing what he can to eke that down, trying to get as many projects through in the next couple of years as possible. The Keno Fund, I bring this to you. There's a couple of things to note. One is that Keno funds continue to increase. So that's a good thing for our community. I've kept the amount that we have available for the community match grant at $50,000. That's what we had budgeted in 23. We're on target to spend $47,000. The big point here is we've been using about 650,000 in Keno funds as property tax relief. But you'll note on your capital improvement plan, you'll see where there are specifically parks and some library things that are or projects that are marked with a K for Keno. And we try and get those to line up pretty well through the year so that we're not taking more out of the Keno fund than we are actually funding these projects. But in 2024 budget, we have $1 million that we are using Keno funds or proposing to use $1 million in Keno funds to help support the library, finishing the library. If you recall, when the library did their presentation, they were at that point $3.1 million shy of their fundraising goal. So strictly for budgeting purposes, I budgeted for the idea that they would be able to fundraise another 1.55 million and that the city would contribute 1.55 million. Obviously, if their fundraising has greater success, it's that much less in reserves we'll need to take. But simply because we needed a number for budgeting purposes, I just split it down the middle. But $1 million of that is coming from the Keno fund. Do we want to go through? I'll throw this out to you. Would you rather go through through the capital improvement plan for the city before we go to the utilities then? Does that make sense? Okay. It's not part of the
Slides.
but you have copies in front. Same. So included in your packet is this executive summary. You can see this executive summary that was included in your packet. The general increases were basically just informing you that we're following what the ASME contract and the city non-union folks fall under the typically on increases follow what ASME negotiates. The same with the fire, that's IAFF, International Association of Firefighters. And FOP is the police, and that's under current negotiations. So we're not, normally this is where we would say what the percentage increases are, but we've already talked about that. Going down to the FTE counts, this is just kind of for your information. Right now, as it stands, we have budgeted for an assistant city administrator, as well as we've got we're adding to the administrative staff on the utility side, a utility worker to help us with answering phones and being clerical support for our IT staff, as well as administration for the utilities. But we'll be sharing that particular position. Inspections during the course of this last year, when we were really having trouble hiring, we overhired, if you will, and added an additional full-time inspector. He's been spending a great deal of time working on both training to get the training required, but then also he's working with Steve Kanasik is our longtime mechanical inspector, I guess, plumbing and mechanical inspector. And also doing, we're trying to do a little bit more in terms of not such reactive building inspection code violations. Instead of waiting for somebody to basically rat out their neighbor, hey, they're putting this in, we're trying to be a little bit more proactive with that. Or dilapidated buildings. We know that there are a number of them throughout the community. And hopefully with this additional body in that department, we'll be able to move forward with that. The engineering department also has a couple of positions added. One is a clerical position in the first year, and then in the second year, we're adding a construction engineer in addition to the assistant public works director. Now, that construction engineer would be a position that would be needed and paid for if we are fortunate enough to get the FEMA grant for the Elkhorn Drainage District. That's going to be a six-year project. And so we really can't tap on existing city staff if we intend to get all these other things done. And so we'd anticipate that we need to have an additional hire. And so we have the hire, and then I'm not 100% sure we have that offset for the grant dollars reflective in the engineering department, but we will add that. So it will help improve our use of fund balance when we do that. In the fire department, we're anticipating one additional, and that would be an assistant chief position, somebody that would be able to help us with training and a little bit more consistent training across the shifts, as well as support the fire chief as we are working to build those two stations. In the police department, we are still funding the co-responder position, but that's currently being, that work is currently being handled by a grant that it's an individual that comes and helps us from Lutheran Family Services. And by the way, somebody throw something at me if I say something wrong about your department, please. So also in the police, we're anticipating hiring an additional community service officer. You'll see that on both police and animal control. They've done a great job of lightening the burden of our officers so that they can handle the more emergent police work. But we've, at the staffing level of 3, we've not been able to cover basically all the hours of the week. And so with the hope of hiring an additional person there, we're hoping to cover more of those hours. In the planning department, we're budgeting to add, the position right now is called, for budget purposes, is a zoning administrator. But basically that's support for Jennifer in the planning department. She's a department of 1, as you can see. And so we're looking to give her some additional support there. In the parks recreation areas, and then also down in Splash Station and Ronan, Nick has done a good job of kind of repurposing positions and hours. And so there is a narrative down toward the bottom of the sheet, but I thought it would be a little bit easier to just talk about the changes here. On the library, we're not actually, I don't believe we're actually adding staff. We're just increasing hours with the expectation that we'll have basically more square footage to cover with that expansion project. And, the expectation that we'd be offering additional programming in that area. You can see the addition of the transit fund. I believe that in the street department, we've got some ads as well. And as I mentioned, there's a little bit more descriptor on the second page here. This is the part-time or seasonal individuals. That's where that the city administrator, that's where that utility worker is coming in. And then yeah, you could see, I don't know that we actually changed individual hours in this or number of people in Splash, but we changed how they're allocated, for lack of a better way to say it. And then in the library, as I said, we were extending hours of some of our part-timers to cover. We need more people in the building because the building is larger. So we're showing the total budgeted dollars. This would be wages and benefits. One thing to note is we're expecting a fairly significant increase in our insurance premiums, the health insurance premiums for employees, both the employee and the employer share, because there's a percentage that's matched for that. But you can see the significant impact that we have in 2024. That increase is kind of the double barrel between health insurance and then the additional staff and the wage increases that we've talked about. Amy Painter in our accounting department put this together for us, and I think she did a nice job. This is an example. I'm not going to go through this whole list because it's a rather exhaustive list of here's how we've gone from, like, for example, in the city administration position, it was a half-time position with the utilities. It's now a full-time position. We've added an assistant city administrator, and then she's listed what the impact for those are for the 2 years. So you could see the changes there. There's, for example, in transit, we're actually adding staff in the second year because we're hopeful that things will take off and we'll be needing to get a separate director for that position just to handle the volume. We do have 3 vans. And so, you know, if we get to the point where we're running 3 vans for the 8 hours or so, it's going to be quite a lot because it is federally funded. And as we've found out, everything is more difficult. The more federal dollars you add, the more difficult it becomes. And so there's lots of biweekly reporting. They don't even want you to wait till the end of your month. As soon as you run payroll, they want to see reports to know exactly how many hours people have worked and what we paid them and the benefits that went along with that. So that's the broad strokes of our what we're planning for personnel. As you're looking at it very quickly, were there any questions I can answer for you?
Any questions at this point? I think we're good, Jody.
Okay.
Let's continue on.
Sure. Boy, this is going to be really tough to see. Don't panic. I'm not reading the whole thing to you. I just wanted to explain a few things about it. The first thing you'll notice at the top is I've put in the archways. When we did the downtown revitalization piece of the comprehensive plan, one of the ideas that came from that were adding archways along Military, or excuse me, it would be at Military and Main, so that as you're heading south through that intersection, you would see and I don't know what it will look like, welcome to Fremont or something like that. And then also at 6th and Broad Street, as you would turn east onto 6th Street, you would see that archway. And in working with the downtown business, or excuse me, the business improvement district, which is different than all the downtown, it's the business improvement district. The other funds that you see listed there, they are expecting to contribute to that project. So that's part of that, those partnerships I was talking about. This is an example of one of those. And again, these are projects that, you know, if you have questions or concerns about the split or something like that, I mean, that's part of this budget process. We're bringing it to you as a proposal from the individual departments. The large items that you'll see on this, let me see if I can get to scroll down a little bit more. So for the fire department, you can see that we have the 2 new fire stations that are proposed. It does still say North Main and 23rd Street Masonic Park. We have not yet identified exactly where those will go. It's just simply a placeholder. We would expect that would be funded primarily by, we have public safety bonds. There's actually a different kind of bond, because a public safety bond actually is supported by property tax. And we know we don't want to impose additional tax to our taxpayers. So this would be, this particular kind of bond would allow us to pledge our sales tax that we receive to repay the bonds. And currently what we receive in sales tax would be enough to support about a $25 million bond in total, without any problem for us. So you can see this designation over, you can't see it on the screen here, but you can see it on your pages there where it says PSB, those are for public safety bonds. We continue to invest in, for example, on our police department, we're continuing to increase not increase, but add to our fleet and keep our cruisers updated, as well as on the fire side, you can see that we're replacing an ambulance. We're replacing a fire engine, but then we're adding an additional fire engine that would be expected in the later years to support that second station. But of course, we would want to have equipment at that station. The top line here, you can see we have the law enforcement center. It is not a joint law enforcement center. It is a law enforcement center that includes both the communications as well as the police department. We're funding that, taking those reserves that we had pledged in the last 2-year budget. And then we're going to, right now we have $1 million in general fund reserves. When we have a more solid number of where we're at for the general fund, that number would increase, because we would obviously want to use our reserves rather than bond, particularly when we're looking at interest rates in the 4 to 5% range. It doesn't make sense to sit on funds when we can go ahead and invest them in our buildings. So that number for the public safety bonds there would be fluid. The idea would be we would get, and I mentioned this before, we would get the police department, the design going in 2024, design and engineering, you'll see that in 2024, and actually build it in 2025. We can't pay for it all. And so we're going to have to issue some bonds of some kind to finish the police station. And at that point, we'll be looking at and be a lot further down the road of what we're going to do with the fire stations. And so I would look at perhaps doing some bond anticipation notes. You can issue those about a year in advance and say, well, we know we're going to need some, but right now we need the cash to finish paying for the police station. Then we would, once we have a better idea number on our fire stations, we would go ahead and issue those bonds as basically joint bonds for public safety. We have that budgeted at 17.25 billion. And we are, for the law enforcement center. Yeah, we talked about that, using the reserves. Another item that we wanted to highlight. We've got more of those public-private partnerships with things like the Mueller Field dugout. We're expecting that perhaps the MU and or Midland would be helping out with that. So you can see multiple funding sources for those. Toward the bottom of this second page, you will see a turf facility for $12.5 million. We actually have that out in 2026. It's the plan of the Parks Department to consider putting in a turf facility. I hesitate. I won't bring Nick to the microphone because he'll talk about it even longer than I will, because he's very excited about it. It would probably require general obligation bonds of some kind. We don't have $12 million laying around, but again, we'd be also looking at possible partnerships. with other athletic organizations. I know Midland is interested in having a official turf. There's an official size that everybody wants, and that would be what we'd be anticipating. And it would go kind of between Splash Station and the Johnson Crossing Academic Academy. So the JCAC over there. And moving along. On page 5 starts the street fund. The first section there is the maintenance department piece, the street department itself. You'll see that we have the street department multi-use building, and it's budgeted there. The amount that we have listed, we're not sure yet exactly what we're doing. We have greatly reduced the budget for it. I think at one point, Jeff, how much was
22 or something.
like $22 million? And it just, there was no way that we could find our way clear to spend $22 million. We've set the budget for this right now at $12 million. We don't know what that will look like, whether we'll cut the size of the new building or perhaps purchase a building that's in existence today. We have not made that determination yet, but 12 million was something that we thought we could work into our budget. It does show general fund reserves, and I'll be honest, as I'm standing here looking at it, oh, I know why that is. So we've split the cost of this. 50%, or excuse me, 45% is going to the street department, because they will be housed there, wherever that ends up being. Fleet maintenance was 20%. And with fleet maintenance, we're splitting that in half again. The utilities is paying for half of that because it'll be a shared service department, and the city will be paying half of that. And then the Parks Department portion was 25%. And so the general fund reserves is a combination of the parks shop area as well as the city's half of the fleet. So you can see right now the split getting general fund, that GRES or general fund reserves of $4 million. That's for the Parks Department's share of that building. The beyond that, where it says street improvements, those are, and I'm not on that page, I apologize. Here we go. Just after that multi-purpose building, then you'll find the street improvements that are listed there. One thing that you'll see on this is there are areas that we have marked that these are AIC, that's aid to construction. That would be where another party, whether it be a developer or a business, is contributing to the cost of some of our paving projects. And that's something that is relatively new to our budgets, but if you see something funded with AIC, that's what that is for. I don't know that Justin had made very many changes from the 1 and 6 report. Is he here? Is that right?
It's very similar to 1 and 6.
Very similar to the 1 and 6. And in there are a lot of projects on this list, and you'll note if you go back into the detail, the engineering department, he has a fair amount in engineering costs or the professional services in the engineering department. And in order to get all of these projects accomplished, we might have to rely on some additional outsourcing of the engineering to get all the projects done that we need. We do have the Assistant Public Works Director position posted, but have not had any candidates as of yet, I believe. So. The airport fund is on page 8. You might want to take a note of the totals on the street fund is the. So you can see the numbers that are at the bottom here are match up with what you see on your street fund report. And we do have a great number of projects we're hoping to get done. I'm pointing out the airport because there are parts of this that they don't have fund reserves significant enough to support the 10% match that they have for their federal projects. And so you'll see the use of general fund reserves to help augment that. We have, to the extent that we can, really held the line on how much. I think the project that we had, basically the runway was a total of 7 million. Is that right?
That was the original grant application.
Okay.
The total cost is under 5. Will come in with bids and engineering contracts.
But even at 5 million, that would leave the airport fund with 500,000, right? To match.
Correct.
And they don't have that much in their fund balance. And so we'll need to have some support come in from the general fund for that purpose. So I didn't want you to think we were trying to slide that through. We wanted to point that out to you, that we're expecting that we'll have to use some general fund reserves or general fund tax dollars to support the capital projects that are out there. We have on the last item, the maintenance hangar construction. That's not something that I believe we're anticipating using any of the general fund reserves on. I don't believe. Certainly not in the 24 and 25 time period. Oh, I went the wrong. And then the last page are the special projects. Those are things that are, the funding comes from a multitude of sources. Predominantly, we show trails there. We have the last remaining project from the flood event is the Hormel Park boat ramp. We need to get that one finished. And then we're putting it in as using the reserves that are in the special projects fund to pay for extending the levy. I think I've talked about that before, that Farmland Fremont levy, extending it to the northwest just a little bit more to get it all the way out to Ridge Road. And then improvements fund isn't a very good descriptor for you, but it does entail those paving districts or sidewalk districts or a storm sewer district if we had one. That's where the cost for those are showing on that last page there. No. Oh, and the American Rescue Plan. On page 9. The funds, that $4.4 million fund that we have received as part of the COVID disaster, if you will. We have until December of 2026 to spend all of those funds, or we have to return them. The Elkhorn Drainage Project will not be, we won't spend enough on that project to for just the city's share to spend all of those before December of 2026. And so I think Justin has talked before about a plan that he has to expand Johnson Lake and take basically from the 5th Street drainage ditch, improving that ditch and moving it to the east along Luther Road, and then channeling it from that corner down to the Johnson Park area, and basically provide what will become a wetland to the south. So we would likely extend the trail down, and the anticipation would be there'd be like a boardwalk.
That's the concept right now.
That's the concept right now. But that's how we're anticipating spending those. He also has looking at drainage up along the Rawhide. That's where we would like to consider doing something with the mall pond. There's a pond that sits behind the mall that is actually, I believe, open to the Rawhide Creek. And so we'd be looking at trying to make some modifications there to prevent more flooding along the Rawhide ditch. And then the other item is doing a master plan so that we would have kind of a how-to, the best way to, these two are large projects to really get the best bang for our buck. But then there are small adjustments that we can make throughout the community. It is a very flat community. We all know that. But if there are small projects that we can do to improve the stormwater lines to prevent street flooding in the event of it's even an inch an hour rain and you can't drive down some streets. And so we're looking at ways that we can make those improvements. And a stormwater master plan would help us with that. Did I miss anything? So that's the kind of a high level overview on the capital plan for the city, the executive summary on the personnel, and the kind of the snapshots on where we're at with the general fund budgets. As we get perhaps more solid numbers, I'll try and get sent out to council so that it is included as part of the packet on the 29th. The recap of the sales tax, and then more of a summary on the expenditures in the general fund as well. But in the meantime, the purpose of bringing this to you and asking you to look it over a week in advance of the first hearing, the first budget hearing is on the 29th. The hope is that as questions occur to you, concerns occur to you, that you reach out to staff, the mayor, and we can address. We're not perfect. As I mentioned, we've been scrambling, so there could be mistakes involved in this. There could also be things that maybe don't translate well. You're not following what the plan is with some of these things. We want to make sure that you're comfortable with the budget that's presented. And with that, I will turn it over to Jeff for the utilities. Let's see if I'm smart enough to do this. Is it gonna let you go? Is it not going, Jeff?
There you go. All right, Mayor, City Council, Jeff Shanahan, Utilities General Manager. I'd just like to reinforce what the mayor and Jody both said, and especially like to thank Jody and Finance Department, all the department heads again for all the work they've done on this budget. Jody's been doing double work plus, and we really appreciate all the efforts she put into it and all the help she's given us, and same with Kristen and Laura. So that being said, the Department of Utilities, we have 4 funds. Each one operates independently. That's electric, water, sewer, and natural gas. Each one's responsible to maintain their own reserves and their own rates to support the operations. Along with those utilities, we have some shared services. These apply to customer services is really utilities only. Administration, that's for the utilities portion of it. The information technology, finance, and human resources are shared amongst the Department of Utilities and the City of Fremont. So those are split 50-50 for those resources. Oops.
Yeah, it's good.
I don't know. There you go. The natural gas rates, they cover the cost to operate the system. The cost of the gas is what we did when we estimated for revenues and for cost of gas. We use the $5. That's what it's going to cost to sell us, and really the gas gets passed on. The cost of transportation, that's also based on our actual costs. And then as those costs go up and down, we have a fuel cost or a transportation cost adjustment on that. The electric fund has a similar way to take into account the varied costs of natural gas or coal or purchase power in the event of outages. And we put that into the fuel cost adjustment. That number is looked at every month that we look at our fuel supplies and our gas supplies, and we adjust this. Both or all 3 of the cost adjustments are on a 12-month rolling average. So the ratepayers don't get hit with a real high increase one month and then goes back down the next. We kind of filter those in slowly, but we take them out slowly too. The water and sewer funds, they don't have any kind of costs associated like that. So they're basically funded just off of their rates for what it costs us to operate the facilities. And like I said before, all the utilities are required to be self-supporting. So each one has to operate as their own business unit. What we're looking at doing, you've already approved some of these major capital projects. So what we're going to be looking at doing is more than likely looking at issuing some bonds to cover the cost of those. Some of the major ones that we're looking at adding on is the ELG project at the Lundy Wright Power Plant. That one you approved a few meetings ago. There's also the Unit 8 generator stator rewind. That generator was built in 76. We're still using the same windings that it was built with. So it's due for a rewind on that. We've already rewound the field. So all we're going to do is the stator on that. Substations, G&E transformers, and the balance of the substation equipment. We've already approved the transformers. Those are on order. And you have approved some of the equipment that goes into the substations. That's going to total about $7.5 million. Then there's the OPPD, NPPD, Fremont transformer and interconnecting equipment out at our out by substation D, which is north of the country club, there's another substation across the street from that. That's the OPD NPD substation, and we have an interconnection there. We're looking to add another transformer into that substation, which will improve the reliability for Fremont by giving us a much stronger interconnection on the west side of town. So that's, especially on days like today, that's a vital, well, all these are, but they're vital infrastructure improvements. On the water system, we're looking at adding what they call a horizontal well out at the well field. This will produce about 10 million gallon a day of water, and it'll basically be our primary source of water for Fremont. And then we'll supplement it with the existing well field wells that we have. So those projects all combined, we would issue as general utility bonds, and then they would be paid out through each one of their departments in their capital improvement plan and their depreciation schedules. We're going to look at utility rates. Do they all have these? Yeah, everybody should have a copy of the summary sheets that we got that summarize each one of the funds. And so what we'll do is once this gets approved, we'll take these summary sheets and we'll work with finance and our rate consultant to make sure that we have rates established that'll support the improvement projects we have and the existing maintenance that we currently have, in addition to providing the 8 months of reserves, operating reserves that we're required to have based on City Council's resolution in 2021. So you can see that the electric fund is in the second year in the hole about 1.3 million. We're going to monitor the revenues and see where that's at and try to possibly take some out of the reserves to cover that deficit and see if we can't we'll see where those rates fall. Based on our projections, looks like the water system will be okay. And the waste and the natural gas system will be okay. And that's based on our assumptions for costs and for what the revenues are going to be projected at. The one fund that is definitely going to need some help is the wastewater system. And I think if you'll remember when we raised, back about 6 months, maybe it might have been a little longer than that, we came in here for a rate increase on the wastewater to cover the bonds to build the project. We had mentioned that we were going to look at this in the budget cycle and possibly have to do another increase in the wastewater. And I think this spells it out clearly that we're going to have to look at wastewater very carefully and see where we're at. Definitely, we're not going to be able to meet the required, well, we can't make ends meet. And then we still have to build up the reserves that's required in each one of the funds independently. So we're going to be doing that going forward. So you'll be seeing that come across as we go through this process. The staffing, I think Jody kind of touched on that already. On the utility standpoint, what we're really adding for staffing is we've added a general manager versus a half-time when it was combined. So that got added into this budget. And then we have a part-time person that's going to be added for administration. In the water sewer department, we're adding 2 people to work in the water department. One of those will be charged over to the city. Our goal with those 2 people is to be able to start going through our sanitary and storm sewer system, cleaning them out, inspecting them, cameraing them, getting GIS information, getting all that information prepared so that we can be more proactive in our planning rather than reactive. There's been some areas of town that probably haven't been inspected for many, many years. Our goal would be that these 2 people would use the existing equipment that we have at the utilities and just start at one end of town, and we'll just work through it and we'll get it all mapped out and get it all inspected and cleaned and be able to, maintain the system in a proper fashion. The additional folks at the wastewater treatment plant, they've had many, many improvements to the treatment plant over the last few years. When you add that kind of equipment to the system, you've got to have people to maintain it and to operate it. So we're adding a couple people out there to help us maintain that system. And then the distribution system, we're adding a couple people back that were removed when we upped engineering and GIS. So we just want to get those guys back to the staff they had previously. All departments are seeing increased maintenance, growth on the systems. So in order to maintain them properly, we've got to have the staff to support that. Okay, yeah. So here's some of the major capital funds. I'm having a hard time seeing this far across the room. Some of the major projects that we were looking at in the electric production are the bottom edge system. We talked about that, the ELG. Then we're going to be looking at bringing an ELG loader to council. We've got to get rid of the fly ash or the bottom edge since we can't haul it out slurry. We're looking at replacing one of the circ wells, trying to get the capacity up for the units 6 and 7. They run on well water for their condensers rather than a cooling tower. So that improves the efficiency of the condensers and makes the units have a higher output, thus improving their efficiency. Oh yeah, the wastewater piping. That's the piping system that takes the water over to the lagoon and back for the plant. Even though it won't be handling the bottom ash water anymore, it's still used for our waste streams that leave the plant. They go over to the lagoon. And we have had many, many failures on that piping, and we just got to get to where we replace it now. That was installed in 1980 or before, and that that kind of water that runs through that piping system is very abrasive and takes the pipes out, and we've had to repair it many, many times. The generator stator rewind, we talked about that. That's a important component for Unit 8. And then a coal handling front end loader. Those are, we have a replacement schedule on those, and this one's up for its time. So that's what we're looking at on electric production. On the electric distribution system, we're looking at the transformer at the OPPD NPPD substation. That's vital for our interconnection to other utilities. And as Fremont's load grows, and we're setting a peak today. So, you know, Fremont's demands are going up and up and up every day. And so we've got to have good, solid interconnections to support those loads, even with Unit 8 online. But when you try to take Unit 8 offline or the gas turbine offline for maintenance with our existing interconnection, it is very, very difficult to get that scheduled and approved through the SPP market when they're using all these contingency evaluation periods. So what used to happen in our shoulder months, we would do outages. Nowadays, our shoulder month loads are going to be higher than some of our peaks would be in normal years. So we're just having to make sure we have all the energy requirements and the interconnection to support that when we do outages. The substation E and G transformers and associated substation equipment, we talked about that. That's to improve reliability. It allows us to be able to move loads from one substation to the next so we can do maintenance. In the event that there is a failure on a piece of equipment someplace, we can shift load around to minimize the downtime that customers would be affected by an outage. And this is going to give us a lot more flexibility, plus allow us to grow. Then there's the Washington Heights and Ventura underground cable replacements. I listed these as 2 individual items, but it really goes to our maintenance program that we want to do in distribution system. We want to make sure that all of our equipment is maintained, so we maintain a high level of reliability for the ratepayers. Right now, we're in the process of the Washington Heights underground project being redone. That doesn't mean we're not doing other projects. There is tons of projects in the capital improvement plan for maintenance or for improvements on the system. Plus all of our everyday maintenance, you know, pole inspections and that kind of thing. So really reliability is our number one thing, safety and reliability for our ratepayers. All right, the water project, we had touched on the well improvement project out there that'll allow us to let the system grow. I think this last week, and Keith's here, but I think we pumped about 17 million gallons a day, and we have the capacity of about 21 million gallons a day. We're probably up beyond 17. By the end of this week, we'll probably have another record on that. So you can see as we grow, and then as the pumps age, they're less and less efficient. So we've got to stay on top of that and keep the system going good there. Then we're also looking at potentially having to put some kind of treatment out at the well field. So we're going to run some tests, but we may do some filtration and treatment based on the tests once we get ready to decide to go with this well, and then all the evaluations of the test data we get. And then we have the improvements to the existing system. We go in and we install new mains. We replace mains that are bad. We do a project on, if they're doing an overlay project or something like that, we'll do improvements there. The sewer system has had many, many improvements done over the years. And so right now we're kind of looking at just doing improvements on the infrastructure in town. We'll be paying for the sewer improvements through the depreciation schedules and the operating budget, but we always want to make sure we have some main improvements done in town. So that's either through sewer main replacements or sewer main lining projects. So we're constantly working at those and we're evaluating them. We get these new additional people on staff. That's going to help us highlight them. Maybe we'll find areas that we've been overlooking that we'll be able to take care of and get those resolved. Then there's the water main replacement out at the wastewater treatment plant. That wasn't part of any improvement project, but that's on the list to get that replaced. There's a Headworks building, some work inside there that's going to get done on the piping systems, and then an emergency generator for the wastewater treatment plant that's been in service for, I don't even know, probably original for the plant. Yeah, so probably early 80s or before. The natural gas system, again, kind of like water and sewer, there's always projects done for main extensions and additions to the system as customers come online and additions get put on. Then we're also looking down the road. We would like to add another peak shaving plant to the system. When the existing peak shaving plant was put in about 1995, if I remember right. Fremont's gas load was probably in the 10,000 MCF a day peak demand. And so when you added a 2,000 a day gas air system to the network, that allowed us to shave about 20% of our gas. So on those critical days when we're, having to bring in very, very expensive gas, we can make the evaluation. Do you run the propane plant, offset about 20% of that so you don't have to go out and buy that gas, or do you buy the gas, which one's ever cheaper? Well, now that Fremont's gas system is up around 23,000 MCF a day at a peak, we're down to about an 8% coverage for margin there. So you're only allowed to inject about 40% propane air mix into the gas at any given time. So you're maxed out on that border station. So ideally we would put one on the east side of town, come into our other border station and try to get that system up to around 3,000 or 4,000 MCF a day. That'll help us on our peak days, and it'll allow us to have to buy less capacity, because we can look at saying, okay, we'll run the peak shaving plant to cover 10 or 15 days a year rather than buying capacity for the entire year. So we'll look at those kind of things and see where we're at when we size that peak shaving plant. So right now in these budget years, we're looking at trying to get some engineering done, some of those evaluation work done, and go from there on that. And so then the new peak shaving plant, we would be looking right now in the budget that would be hitting us in the 2026 budget, 25, 26. We'll see where we're at on it and see what the results come back of the evaluation on the engineering. So that's what I have for the capital improvement staffing and the overall rates for the utilities. Is there any questions?
Any questions for Mr. Shanahan from the council? Okay, thank you for the presentation. Jody, is there anything else you want to finish on?
No, other than just really urging folks, if you have questions, concerns, things you want to go over, Jeff and I are making ourselves available to meet with you and discuss it, because we really want the conversation to be for the first reading. We will, any changes that we make, will go over the changes that we make, but they may be based on some of the input that you've offered up. So as you have an opportunity to look through the materials, please feel free to reach out.
Any final comments or questions from the city council at this point? Okay, I just want to thank all the work that, again, that has been done, and we'll have our first reading will be scheduled for next city council meeting, which would be the next Tuesday. So I got dates in my head.
29th.
So thank you. And so again, we'll have the budget then posted as well, and go from there. There's no other comments. I would take a motion to adjourn. Councilman Jensen,
I will make the motion to adjourn.
Councilwoman Ganna,
I'll second.
cast your votes.
Motion carries 7-0, Mayor.
We are adjourned.